Welcome, everyone. We are studying session 17 this week, and we'll begin with a little prayer, gratitude, and thanksgiving. Big, open-hearted thanks to those of Ra. Those entities of the Law of One. So dedicated to this information, to this way, this truth. Thank you for bringing it to us. Thank you for the fidelity of this information. Thank you also to those, the L&L research group. Thank you to Carla and Don and Jim, who originally brought in this channel, this channeling. And thank you to those still on the team who help carry it forward and support the study. We're humbly grateful to stand upon your shoulders. Thank you for the launching point into our paths. Thank you.
Thanks, BJ. Okay, so session 17 is not quite as long as the last session we read. Session 16 was like 63, but there's 45 in this one. So it seems likely we'll take 2 weeks to get through it, but we'll just see how it goes. Yet again, it's a wonderful, juicy session. I'm excited to get into it. So anybody feel inspired to start us off reading?
Sure. Session 17, February 3rd, 1981. I am Ra. I greet you in the love and the light of the infinite creator. Before we communicate by answer, we shall correct an error which we have discovered in the transmission of our information to you. We have difficulty dealing with your time-space. There may again be errors of this type. Feel free to question us that we may recalculate in your time-space measurements. The error we have discovered concerns one of the arrivals of both the Orion group into your planetary sphere of influence and the corresponding arrival of emissaries of the Confederation. We gave dates of 2600, 2600 years for the Orion entity, 2300, 2300 for Confederation entity. This is incorrect. The recalculation indicates numbers 3600, 3600 for Orion entity, and 3300, 3300 for Confederation entry. Oh, did I say entity before?
Yeah, those are all entries.
I meant entry. Entry. We communicate now.
Let me just make a quick comment there. So they're just correcting themselves. They misspoke in terms of putting numerical values to time frames in response to Don's question. So they just corrected themselves. And in this context, when they say we have difficulty dealing with your time space, they mean time. It's confusing because time space is the metaphysical reality. It's the spiritual realm. But sometimes they use time space to mean time. So I'm pretty sure when they say we have difficulty dealing with your time space, they don't mean they have difficulty dealing with the metaphysical half of our reality. They mean they have difficulty with a numerical measurement of how we calculate time. So that's just, again, take it if that resonates, but that's my understanding. When they say time space, they mean time. What we would say is time. Okay.
Okay. Questioner, thank you very much. I wish to say again, consider it an honor, great honor, and also a privilege as my inaudible. And I would like to reiterate that my questions may sometimes go a little off because I keep going on something that I had already started to work into the applications of the law of one to better understand primarily the free will principle and further distortions that we discover. I got 3 questions just now in meditation. I'll ask them first before we continue. First, we are now in the 4th density. Will the effects of the 4th density increase in the next 30 years? Will we see more changes in our environment and our effect upon our environment? I am Ra. The 4th density is a vibrational spectrum. Your time-space continuum has spiraled your planetary sphere and your, what we would call galaxy, what you call star, into this vibration. This will cause the planetary sphere itself to electromagnetically realign its vortices of reception of the in-streaming of cosmic forces expressing themselves as vibrational webs, so that the Earth will thus be 4th density magnetized, as you might call it. This is going to occur with some inconvenience, as we have said before, due to the energies of the thought forms of your peoples, which disturb the orderly constructs of energy patterns within your Earth spirals of energy, which cause entropy and unusable heat. This will cause your planetary sphere to have some ruptures in its outer garment, while making itself appropriately magnetized for 4th density. This is the planetary adjustment. You will find a sharp increase in the number of people, as you call mind-body-spirit complexes, whose vibrational potentials include the potential for 4th vibrational distortions. Thus, there will seem to be, shall we say, a new breed. These are those incarnating for 4th density work. There will also be a sharp increase in the short run of negatively oriented or polarized mind-body-spirit complexes and social complexes due to the polarizing conditions of the sharp delineation between 4th density characteristics and 3rd density self-service orientation. Those who remain in 4th density upon this plane will be of the so-called positive orientation. Many will come from elsewhere, for it would appear that with all of the best efforts of the Confederation, which include those from your people's inner planes, inner civilizations, and those from other dimensions, the harvest will still be much less than that which this planetary sphere is capable of comfortably supporting in service.
Okay. Let's pause there.
Okay.
There's quite a lot in there that I want to make space to discuss. Anyone have anything to say about that?
The ruptures and what is it? The ruptures and something.
The outer garment.
Have we experienced those already?
So
Was this earthquakes?
I've heard people think that it's earthquakes and like the outer garment being the sort of tectonic layer of, like the plates, what we call the plates, the tectonic plates. My intuition has told me that the outer garments actually have to do with the electromagnetic, what's it called? The electromagnetic field that surrounds the Earth that that sort of mitigates the cosmic influxes.
Magnetosphere or whatever.
Yeah, the magnetosphere. And I'm not sure. I've heard that the outer garment, people have thought that means the sort of physical outer crust of the Earth, and that's possible. And you can see that there has been tectonic movement, there has been volcanic action. So it could be that it's the outer garment is the crust of the Earth, but somehow it's never quite settled with me, and I thought it was more of a subtle energetic, the outer garment being the sort of like the energetic protection that surrounds the Earth, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you all think about that? What do you imagine the outer garments of Earth being ruptured might be?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was like when Atlantis sank, was that a rupture of the outer garment? Because I hope that doesn't happen. I really don't know. I think the energetic thing. I don't feel like we so far up till today, and supposedly we're already in fourth density, so the transition's happening. There haven't been any like huge ruptures that I would consider like. I mean, I've heard that like there's a lot of Confederation entities like, sending love to reduce that so that it's not catastrophic. I've heard that there are a bunch of earthquakes, but is that what it is? Earthquake? I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know.
I mean, from when I've looked into the science of it, it doesn't seem like Earth, at least the records we have, it doesn't seem like there's like a significant uptick in earthquake activity, more so than there has been historically, as far as I can tell. And same with, volcanic and tectonic action. It doesn't seem like, from what I can tell, there's any particular, anomalies going on around those kinds of things. What there are anomalies about is the decrease in the power of the Earth's magnetic fields. And we're supposedly in a minimum right now. Like we're supposedly, the Earth's magnetic field is at the lowest power it's been in maybe thousands of years. I don't know if any of you know there's a YouTuber named Ben Davidson, and he has a channel called Suspicious Observers, and he's a heliophysicist, and he like diligently tracks the data of the sun and how the sun is interacting with all the planets of the solar system. And he has a pretty profound and unique insight into Earth's, the Earth changes that are going on, including global warming. And he equates it to changes in the sun. And he has some pretty interesting and illuminating teachings that he brings through on his channel. And what he says is that the Earth's magnetosphere is at a kind of like at a very low power or something like that. And so in other words, we get the appearance of aurora borealis at lower latitudes than have happened in thousands of years because of the power of Earth's magnetosphere. So the sun's discharges of energy are able to kind of penetrate more deeply into the layers of Earth, and they manifest as aurora borealis, among other things. And they also have a relationship to earthquakes and tectonic activity as well. So
Seems like Amanda wanted to say something.
yeah, Amanda and then Nia.
I was just going to ask you to put that into the Telegram chat and then point to Amanda.
Sure, I'll do that. Thanks.
I was just going to add that this idea of the ruptures in the outer garment, I was just thinking of the outer garment as the topical part of our planet, and the ruptures being like a blanket term for all kinds of climate change. Thinking of like certain places, desertification and hurricanes and tsunamis and all of those things which have been on the rise over the last 30 years. So yeah, not just earthquakes, but just, yeah, I was thinking of ruptures, and I think a little bit more of a general term related to climate change.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
It does make sense. Mm-hmm.
I want to say something too. Just about the portion of session 16 that we didn't actually get to. I was just reading it before we started. And in 1659, Don was asking about wanderers. Are they subject to Orion thoughts? And Ra said, the only difference occurs in the spirit complex, which, if it wishes, has an armor of light, if you will. And it just feels connected to me. I don't know whether it has any actual connection, but the outer garment of the planetary body and the armor of light. feel like they could be connected.
Interesting. Never thought about that. Yeah, the whole, climate change is such a huge and politically polarized topic these days. There's such a fight about, is it man-made or is it natural, and what's the cause, and what are the agendas behind it, et cetera, et cetera. It's fraught. The conversation is fraught, and it's difficult to navigate it with ease and grace. And then, I'm always like, well, from Ra's perspective, like, at least a portion of the heating of the planet has to do with like the collective mind of humanity. And it's like, good luck bringing that into the conversation. But I just intuitively, I feel it. It's like, it makes so much sense to me that is the case. And actually, I think Charles Eisenstein, his analysis of climate change is probably, in terms of like popular figures, he has the most sophisticated and nuanced perspective about climate change that I've ever seen. And he goes beyond, he believes it's at least partially influenced by, our activity, humankind's activity, but he has a more layered, kind of opinion about it. And it's encouraging. And he's a wanderer, and he knows it. And he understands some of those other less materialistic viewpoints that relate to these sorts of things. So he's been a source of inspiration for me in terms of like evolving the conversation about climate change. But I think this 17.1, what we just read, definitely relates. Amanda, I really appreciate what you said. I think it does seem like it's kind of like a general, it probably refers to lots of phenomenon that we could point to. The disrupting of the outer garment probably does refer to not just one thing. It's probably, generally there's going to be lots of, anomalous experiences of Earth's condition. I wanted to ask you all, Ross says in the first paragraph, the fourth density is a vibrational spectrum. Your time-space continuum has spiraled your planetary sphere and your star into this vibration. So, they seem to suggest that Earth and our sun have, kind of physically entered into a band of vibration, like a vibrational spectrum that attends the shift from third to fourth density. And, oh, sorry, Nia, I see your hand up, tracking you. Yeah, so just wanted to see what y'all thought about that. Specifically, like, it's confusing to me because, well, Ra's, their third density planet, Venus, that transitioned from third to fourth, a long time ago. So it doesn't seem like it's just a one-time deal. Anyway, I just wonder if anyone has any thoughts about that. Go ahead, Nia.
I do. That's, I was going to say this about what we were just discussing as well with outer garment and all. And I think I've said this before, but scientists have learned that we see the spiral arms of our galaxy. We know we're a spiral galaxy, and people think of solar years and we picture the sun as being stationary and the planets continuing to orbit cyclically around. However, as we continue to do that, it's spiraling about the arms. We are never in the same place twice, even amongst our own orbit around the sun. Our entire solar system is shifted. And what scientists, I'm a visual learner, so I really geek out when they put these into graphs and visual formats. They showed that we are in a magnetic vortex, and they said they were shocked. They had no idea that this was a thing, and they've only recently discovered this, like within the last couple of years, that the visual they showed was like these, I say magnetic vortex, but it was like a tunnel of a magnetic field. And, if you can visualize scientifically what magnetic fields look like, they kind of, depending on your angle, they round out the edges, kind of square off, and then round back out again, just like our Earth's magnetic field. Like you picture the rounding of the magnet the magnetosphere. Similarly, our solar system has recently moved into this magnetic tunnel. So they actually have a visual of, they're like, they chose the color black. I don't know that it's relative because it's magnetism, but these lines, kind of like a fiber optic rope is what I picture, with just massive amounts of energy shooting through this tunnel and then veering off. And so we have actually, as we've rotated, we've spun and spiraled into a very physical, third density scientific version, as well as any metaphysical meaning you can glean on your own from that. What Ross said about that shift, that was exactly what popped in my mind, was that picture of how we've spiraled into that magnetic tunnel and the visual that it showed of this. And I also agree, I feel like the answer is all of the above. I feel like the outer garment is our poles creating the magnetic field for us. The sun, I actually just read an article, I think last week, about it's unprecedented the amount of extreme solar flares we're getting. Someone in our collective said they had done an ayahuasca ceremony, and they basically communed with the sun and with Gaia, and that our logos loves us. And we know this, a lot of us that have studied the law of one have meditated on this and still grasp it analytically, but our collective member was able to share that they felt it they felt the love. Like he even said, I understood this analytically before, but this time it was a realization that was a felt sense of the love of our logos, and that nothing is done by accident. So, scientifically, they're speaking of the increase in solar flares, and I'm really interested to check out the person you just mentioned, because my brain geeks out on this stuff, and that the increase in the solar activity is, down to, I say scientifically, quote, scientifically speaking, having a radiation effect and changing DNA, and is doing all kinds of things to Gaia, but that none of it is, the flip side of that with the law of one is none of it's by accident. It is all intentional. And that the increase in heat and entropy has, that's a whole geeking out on what entropy means and what, the variations of I think of increase in movement towards a direction, kind of like nature abhors a vacuum, tends to be, could be applied in some sense to the energies of the minds and the anger and the emotion behind third density creatures that are going through a lot of catalyst, as a larger scale with the political, and a larger scale with the mind complex, social mind complexes. And I really feel like it's all of the above. Like everything everybody said thus far, with the outer garments of tectonic plates, to our atmosphere, to the energy fields, to the sun, to the point we are in movement of our spiral galaxy. I believe like it's all of these things. And Ra's extremely zoomed out perspective, taking millions, if not billions of years for our Earth to, our solar system, even as a neighborhood, for our neighborhood to move along that spiraling arm to the point that we are now. If we rewound that billions of years to where Venus was, where Ra was from at that time, I am super curious to know if anybody's ever been able to, mathematically like rewind where Venus was in that case, time, space, and space time. Like you said, Aaron, I believe that when Rob mostly says time, space, they basically mean time. And space time has to do more with third density location. Feels space time being a sense of where, and time space being a sense of when, is as we compute it in our third density brains. So short version, I feel like it's all of the above.
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like what you were saying in the beginning, Nia, is that you've seen some evidence that there's science that shows that we're entering into a band within the spiral arm of the galaxy that is a magnetic tunnel, so to speak, and it has a different energetic. That is also what Ben Davidson of Suspicious Observers says. He says our solar system has been in a portion of the spiral arm of our galaxy that is kind of a cloud, an energetic cloud, and we're about to exit it. And when we exit it, we'll be in a sort of like a more vacuous portion of the galaxy, and we won't have quite as much protection from not solar energy emissions in this case, but actual galactic and cosmic energy emissions. So it's a much more volatile, energetically volatile space. So, that totally could be. It could be that that's what it tends to third density, changing to fourth. Anyway, it's just interesting to me, the sort of science of all that. And why third density is 75,000 years and the other densities are so much longer, and what it tends to like the end of fourth density. They all seem to correspond with this cosmic clock that Ra mentions. Imagine the face of a clock, and they say your galaxy is such a clock. And it's ticking off measurements and increments of events and of time. And it seems to relate to, how the densities unfold through time. It's just a fascinating topic.
I don't know if this is a quick answer, but I'm just curious. Suspicious observer, what is he suspicious of?
I'm not sure, but he is he's a critical thinker. He doesn't necessarily believe that the mainstream model of physics is correct. He believes that the universe is more interconnected than we assume, and he believes that basically like the solar cycles and what happens to the solar body affects all the planets, and that climate change is at least partially, if not in a majority, driven by solar cycles rather than just purely Earth-based phenomena. And he thinks that there's been a cycle of cataclysms, in a large scale of time. There's been a cycle of cataclysms, and that we are basically on the precipice of a cataclysm, global cataclysm.
Cool. Thanks.
At the end of every episode, he says, "Eyes open, no fear. Be safe, everyone." I think it's so cute.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy. Anyway, I will drop that into the Telegram thread so you guys can check that out.
Just going to request that. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm interested.
Okay. Well, in the sake of time, and there's that's a really rich Q&A, but for the sake of time and moving through the material, let's continue on from 17.2. Anybody else want to read a little bit?
Gosh, we only read one so far.
Yes, correct. 1 of 45.
Well, 0 at 1. Yeah.
I'll read.
Okay.
All right. 17.2. Questioner. Is it possible to help an entity to reach fourth density level in these last days? I am Ra. It is impossible to help another being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness with the Creator from the self. Less important being information such as we share with you. We ourselves do not feel an urgency for this information to be widely disseminated. It is enough that we have made it available to 3, 4, or 5. This is extremely ample reward, for if one of these obtains fourth density understanding due to this catalyst, then we shall have fulfilled the law of one in the distortion of service. We encourage a dispassionate attempt to share information without concern for numbers or quick growth among others. That you attempt to make this information available is, in your term, your service. The attempt, if it reaches one, reaches all. We cannot offer shortcuts to enlightenment. Enlightenment is of the moment, is an opening to intelligent infinity. It can only be accomplished by the self for the self. Another self cannot teach, learn enlightenment, but only teach, learn information, inspiration, or a sharing of love, of mystery, of the unknown that makes the other self reach out and begin the seeking process that ends in a moment. But who can know when an entity will open the gate to the present? Do you
Thanks.
want me to keep going?
Let's pause because it's its own independent little piece. So before we move on to the next topic, let's just pause there. Any comments or thoughts about that?
I got major deja vu reading that just now.
I liked your reading.
Something,
Nice and patient.
yeah. Something that it brings up for me is like just relating to just insight, I guess. Like there have been things that I've read from teachers, and I've heard someone say something so many times, but then suddenly like, oh, I get it. Or like, vice versa on the other side of that, like something that I've helped a client with and like pointed to so many times. And then eventually like, oh, they're like, oh, I get it. That's what you've been saying. And like, you don't get something until you get it. And that just, yeah, I just appreciate that point. And I think it's really helpful. It's a helpful reminder to me to like keep serving, but also stay in my lane, because people are going to get things or they don't get it. And that's up to them. Like, so keep offering, but it's like, do your work and step back. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, they really, that when Ra likes to do, they asked to be described when they were being attributed authorship to the book. They asked to be described as humble messengers of the law of one. And man, this just sums it up. They like, if this whole effort just makes it so that, 3 or 4 or 5 people hear it and one person is impacted by it and, gets a little insight into love, like our work is like it was extremely ample reward. Like they're just so humble, and they say, we encourage a dispassionate attempt to share information. It's like the opposite of, a missionary zeal or, what is it in Christianity where there's this impulse to like, you need to go out and convert people. What is that called? Like,
yeah, evangelism.
Like, it's like, this is like, they're the opposite of evangelists. It's like, they don't care a thing about spreading this message or making sure everyone needs to know this or whatever. And I just find that really, it's actually energetically, it's a piece of like why I trust this material so much, because it's not pushing. They're not pushing this information. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
Well, and also I want to give a shout out to our friends at LL, because they really take this approach too. And it's such an interesting balance of like, they're trying to run a business. They want the business to stay viable so that it can keep sharing the material, but they really aim to have a humble, dispassionate approach. And it's so fascinating. Like working with them is really a fascinating, interesting vibration. Like when we've collaborated with them, it's like, wow, so cool.
Yeah. Nia?
So I think we went over this before, where I remember I was initially, the first time I read that, I was pretty upset, honestly. I was like, 1, 2, 3, that is not okay. If it's an important message, we've had the discussion around, we feel like some of us concluded that the idea was that it kind of goes into, for lack of a better term, the Akashic records, and that the information is available. So even if they've reached one, technically it goes into the records, and then anybody can kind of download or transmit the information as they become available to receive it. And similar to what you were saying, BJ, you know, it's like, now that I'm in my 40s, you know, in my early 20s, I was so passionate about sharing what I was geeking out on my spirituality. I just was like, this book changed my life. Everybody needs a copy of this book that's in my life. And I would literally buy 10 copies of a couple books, you know, and pass them out. And it may land with 1 out of 5 people or something. And it was just like, how is this not changing your entire world? You know, and I was very passionate about it. But literally, the person picked up the book 20 years later and was like, oh, I get it now. I see what, you know, they were not in a place to receive and assimilate and, you know, utilize that information. It's all in its own time. Everybody has kind of like the when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I feel like that's more about the information, the lessons that we're meant to grow from and understand. You can't understand before you're ready to understand it. And a lot of people have to go through a certain amount of catalyst and learning life lessons before a lot of information can be processed in a way that becomes helpful for them. It's one thing to read a spiritual book, you know, and not feel an effect from it versus, oh, I get it. This is resonating with me right now. And I think the word resonating is a big clue there in our literal vibration and frequency that we are vibrating at to be able to assimilate that. But I just remember the first few times I was talking to people, it's like, I don't understand how raw, you know, and I honestly, I'd like, it's kind of like I'd get pouty and put my hand on my hip. I'm like, there's something suspect about this. I don't like that Raw says it doesn't matter that they aren't reaching other people, that they're only reaching them. And I was like, that doesn't feel very good right now. But later in my understanding has evolved to, oh, I think it's because they feel like it's gone into Gaia's Akashic record, and or we can send out the call and ask. It's like, you know, a gong resonating out. Only some people that have ears tuned to hear it can hear it. Other people will never hear that call or will never hear that sound. Whereas suddenly somebody sees someone radiating love light, somebody sees and is experiencing being in the presence of people that are awake, aware, higher vibing, and something clicks with them where they start, that's the inspiration. They start looking, they start questioning, they start something that wasn't there before. So there's like a kind of like the wick being ready for the fire. There has to be preparation and things in place before that level of information can be taken on and applied.
Yeah. Right. And the thing you say about like, and there's a few things that I really appreciate about what you say, but the piece about, oh shoot, I just forgot what I was going to say. I was bookmarking something I wanted to build off of what you said, but now I forgot it. But anyway, I guess I'll just say this, which is, I think Ra also recognizes that their teaching is distinctly advanced from where the Earth, you know, from the lessons that third density, that are appropriate to third density, have everything to do with making the choice. And their teachings are actually quite far beyond that. The law of one is a 6th density teaching, right? And so it's not necessary. It's not appropriate for a lot of people who are just trying to work out, figuring out what their essence is and what their, you know, what their true nature is, and how to really follow that and trust in that and live their lives based on that and make the choice, you know, based on their core essential nature. That's what's relevant. You know, the lessons of third density are not the lessons of the law of one. And they know that. Ra knows that. And I think they recognize that this message that they're carrying may have a cascading effect, because it will probably find wanderers or, you know, or folks who are, for one reason or another, in a position to teach others or inspire others. Oh, what you said was, living it. I think you said something about like, how people can inspire others through their presence and through their activity. And I think that really comes through here. It's like sharing it, sharing your own love of the creator versus sharing information they're just totally different things. And I think Ra is really coming from the perspective of that being a living example of something is far more valuable than sharing the data, of the thing or the information about the thing. And they get into that further in this session too. Anything else on that one? Comments, questions? Okay. All right, moving on to Tunguska, 17.3. Any takers? Amanda.
"17.3. In a meditation a few nights ago, I had the impression of a question about a crater in Russia. I believe it was in Tunguska. Can you tell me what caused the crater? I am Ra. The destruction of a fission reactor caused this crater. Whose reactor? I am Ra. This is what you may call a drone sent by Confederation which malfunctioned. It was moved to an area where its destruction would not cause infringement upon the will of the mind-body-spirit complexes. It was then detonated. What was the purpose of it coming here? It was a drone designed to listen to the various signals of your peoples. You were, at that time, beginning work in a more technical sphere. We were interested in determining the extent and the rapidity of your advances. This drone was powered by a simple fission motor, or engine, as you would call it. It was not that type which you now know, but was very small. However, it was the same destructive effect upon third density molecular structures. Thus, as it malfunctioned, we felt it was best to pick a place for its destruction rather than attempt to retrieve it. For the probability modes of this maneuver looked very, very minute. Questioner, was it danger both blast and radiation? I am Ra. There is very little radiation, as you know of it, in this particular type of device. There is radiation which is localized, but the localization is such that it does not drift with the winds, as does the emission of your somewhat primitive weapons. Questioner, I believe that an analysis of the trees in that area has shown a low radiation level. Is this the reason for such a low radiation level in the trees? I am Ra. This is correct. The amount of radiation is very localized. However, the energy which is released is powerful enough to cause difficulties. Then was the Confederation responsible for Earth receiving nuclear power? I am Ra. It is a point which one cannot judge what is cause. The basic equation which preceded this work was an equation brought through by a wanderer dedicated to service to the planet. That this work should have become foundation for instruments of destruction was not intended and was not given. Can you tell me who that wanderer was and brought through the equation? I am Ra. This information seems harmless, as this entity is no longer of your planetary third density. This entity was named sound vibration complex, Albert. Thank
Okay.
you.
That's a good, let's pause there.
Okay.
That's a topical switch. Has anyone heard of the Tunguska event? So there's just a quick context there. On June 30th, 1908, in the kind of deep forest of Russia, there was a 12 megaton explosion. And the conventional theory about what happened was that there was an asteroid that came into Earth's atmosphere. It was a very large asteroid, 50 to 60 meters in size, and detonated or exploded in the atmosphere before it hit the ground. And it flattened an area of forest about 830 square miles. And it was, there was eyewitness accounts of it happening. So it's a historical event. It's on the historical record. And Ross says it was a drone, a Confederation drone.
I was going to say, I do remember seeing something about it where it was all the trees were flattened in a very specific straight line. And they were like, if this were, asteroid meteor hitting, it would have looked different. They would have something about the alignment of the trees and the way that they fell was very unusual, and no explanation made sense as far as why it would have caused the specific destruction that it did.
Right. This little tidbit, it's definitely what Ra would call, transient information, but it's another one of these little data points that also seems relevant to the current, collective mind of humanity trying to wrap our minds around the ET issue. This is another, strange and fascinating data point of the different kinds of craft that come to Earth and their purpose and their nature. So
I want to say this. I loved it when Dawn was like, I forget which session it was, but Dawn was like, I'm sorry, wait, hold on. I'm having a hard time with this. You're telling me our US government has 500 and something crafts, blah, 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 and he was just, that was, paradigm shifting for him at that moment. And he was adjusting it. And I was like, catch up, dude.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, I may not put this in the book. I don't know if I believe you.
But
cute.
I just love how I love that we are going by the raw contact where we're using the actual tapes as our reference point rather than what was put in the book, because it is a different experience. Hearing Dawn's authenticity around, wait a second, you're trying to tell me you expect me to believe that, he's being very respectful as he's having a, minor, mind-blowing experience there. And I feel like for me, that was one of the hardest parts initially. I'll say it this way. I still am working against my wiring and my patterning around channeling non-third density beings and their messages. And the first run through of Law of One, I would have these moments where I would literally just put the book down and breathe, where I'm like, okay, I have reasons to believe this. I have evidence supporting this. I'm like mentally battling myself internally around, this feels like truth. A, B, and C and D line up for this, yet I'm still internally butting up against this. It was very difficult for me, and I still have a hard time with the term alien, so I like to use non-local entity. That feels better for me. Like, oh, okay, I kind of get this like relief around. I have tension around the word alien or extraterrestrial. for whatever reason. And I'm like, oh, when I say non-local entity, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense now. It like relieves all this tension around the phrasing and the terminology. And I'm like, oh, as soon as I switch that, I'm fine. But before that, it's like, ooh, I'm having a hard time. But I love that Dawn's moved to a point of being able to, because they were already into this. If we think of the history of LL, what that group what they had been doing was channeling non-local entities for almost 20 years or something up to that point. Like they were already, even Dawn having a hard time in that moment listening to Ra's explanation of this quote unquote transient information. We're like, wait a second, that's important to us. We get like we're just these little third density brains here, but we need a second to assimilate this as a truth. Like that's paradigm shifting for a lot of us. So just let me take a breather to get on board with that, you know?
Yep. Totally. Yeah, and I really honor your skepticism. I think it's really healthy, you know, Nia. And I think I honor Don's skepticism when he encountered that information that we just mentioned. And I think it's really important to not bypass our own process, you know, to really like if we feel something feels off or doesn't like quite land, like to really pay attention to that and honor it and not push ourselves past something. That's really a really important to BJ and I both in terms of like what we care about trying to amplify in terms of the culture of our community is like, let's really honor our inner guidance systems. It's everything, y'all. You know, our inner guidance system is everything. And I should do a better job in the beginning of these for the recordings they go on YouTube. I really should probably try to make that disclaimer more obvious because I got a couple of comments a few weeks ago from one of the study groups, and someone was really upset by some things I was saying. And I was just like, listen, if it doesn't resonate for you, just leave it. You know, it's okay. If I get things wrong all the time, I'm sure. I'm not trying to be right. I'm not trying to tell people what's up. I'm just trying to, you know, we're all just trying to share and make sense of this material. So yeah, I just want to put a plug in for skepticism. I think it's really healthy.
Thanks. And you know, Quo says that at the beginning of every everyone. Take what fits, throw the rest of the way. We don't want to disrupt your process at all.
Totally. And they say specifically that allows them to speak freely when they know that they can trust the group to use their own discernment. And I love that. I love that they say that, you know, it's like it allows us to be more free to express ourselves because we know you're taking responsibility for not just believing us. You know, that's awesome. And I feel that too. Okay, let's get into Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, 1710. I guess I'll read this time. Questioner, can you tell me who, before incarnation into this density, was the one known as Jesus of Nazareth? I am Ra. I have difficulty with this question as it is phrased. Can you discover another form for this query? Questioner, yes. What I meant to say was, can you tell me if Jesus of Nazareth came from the Confederation before incarnation here? I am Ra. The one known to you as Jesus of Nazareth did not have a name. This entity was a member of fifth density, and there's a correction there. They mean to say fourth density. So I'm going to say fourth density as I read. Was a member of fourth density of the highest level of that sub-octave. This entity was desirous of entering this planetary sphere in order to share the love vibration in as pure a manner as possible. Thus, this entity received permission to perform this mission. This entity was then a wanderer of no name, of Confederation origins, of fourth density, representing the fourth density understanding of the vibration of understanding or love. Questioner, did you say the fifth vibration was that of love? Fifth density was that of love? I am Ra. I have made an error. The fourth density is that which we intended to say, the highest level of fourth density going into fifth. This entity could have gone on to the fifth, but chose instead to return to third for this particular mission. This entity was of the highest sub-octave of the vibration of love. This is fourth density. Questioner, when I am communicating with you as Ra, are you at times an individualized entity, or am I speaking to an entire complex? I am Ra. You speak with Ra. There is no separation. You would call it a social memory complex, thus indicating manyness. To our understanding, you are speaking to an individualized portion of consciousness. Questioner, do I always speak to the same individualized portion of consciousness in each of the sessions? I am Ra. You speak to the same entity through a channel or instrument. This instrument is at times lower in vital energy. This will sometimes hamper our proceedings. However, this instrument has a great deal of faithfulness to the task and gives whatever it has to this task. Therefore, we may continue even when energy is low. This is why we usually speak to the ending of the session due to our estimation of the instrument's levels of vital energy. Is it okay if I keep going? Okay, I want to see if I can get to the end of the Jesus portion. Questioner, I would like to make a point clear now that I am sure of myself. People of this planet, following any religion or no religion at all, or having no intellectual knowledge of the law of one, or of anything at all, can still be harvested into the fourth density if they are of that vibration. Is this not correct? I am Ra. This is correct. However, you will find few who are harvestable, whose radiance does not cause others to be aware of their, what you may call, spirituality, the quality of the mind-body-spirit complex distortion. Thus, it is not particularly probable that an entity would be completely unknown to his immediate acquaintances as an unusually radiant personality, even were this individual not caught up in any of the distortions of your so-called religious systems. Questioner, when Jesus of Nazareth incarnated, was there an attempt by the Orion group to discredit him in some way? I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner, can you tell me what the Orion group did in order to try to cause his downfall? I am Ra. We may describe in general what occurred. The technique was that of building upon other negatively oriented information. This information had been given by the one whom your peoples called Yahweh. This information involved many strictures upon behavior and promised power of the third density, service to self nature. These two types of distortions were impressed upon those already oriented to think these thought forms. This eventually led to many challenges of the entity known as Jesus. It eventually led to one, sound vibration complex Judas, as you call this entity, who believed that it was doing the appropriate thing in bringing about or forcing upon the one you call Jesus, the necessity for bringing in the third density planetary power distortion of third density rule over others. This entity, Judas, felt that if pushed into a corner, the entity you call Jesus would then be able to see the wisdom of using the power of intelligent infinity in order to rule others. The one you call Judas was mistaken in this estimation of the reaction of the entity Jesus, whose teach learning was not oriented towards this distortion. This resulted in the destruction of the bodily complex of the one known as Jesus to you. Questioner, then if the entity Jesus was fourth density, and there are wanderers on the planet today who came from fifth and sixth density, what was it that Jesus did that enabled him to be such a good healer? And could these fifth and sixth density beings here today do the same? I am Ra. Those who heal may be of any density which has the consciousness of the spirit. This includes third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. The third density can be one in which healing takes place just as the others. However, there is more illusory material to understand, to balance, to accept, and to move forward from. The gate to intelligent infinity can only be opened when an understanding of the in-streamings of intelligent energy are opened unto the healer. These are the so-called natural laws of your local space-time continuum and its web of electromagnetic sources, or nexi, of in-streaming energy. Know then first the mind and the body. Then, as the spirit is integrated and synthesized, those are harmonized into a mind-body-spirit complex, which can move among the dimensions, and which can open the gateway to intelligent infinity, thus healing self by light and sharing that light with others. True healing is simply the radiance of the self, causing an environment in which a catalyst may occur, which initiates the recognition of self, by self, of the self-healing properties of the self. There's actually a couple more, but I feel like I've already read. Maybe I'll just pause there. I don't want to overdo it. Any comments there?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
That last bit that you read about healing. So, am I interpreting so what I'm hearing is like, really healing is just if you can, like, it's a self-healing process of like somehow getting your other self, the one who needs healing, to realize that they're already whole and perfect, and then they're healed in some sense. And you do that by you yourself radiating the sense of wholeness. Is that, am I interpreting right?
That's precisely correct from how I'm interpreting it. And again, I mean, maybe I'm not interpreting it correctly, but that's exactly what I think they're saying.
Okay, cool. So Jesus, these, there's all the stories of Jesus like healing the blind and like the sick. So at the end of the day, what is he like? Went to these people and like, he's like, "Oh, you guys have faith, you are healed," and then they just believed him, and then they were healed. Is that?
Well, he modeled it, you know. I think that was the key. He didn't just say the words. It seems to me like he lived his life and he interacted with everybody he came in contact with, like from the, you know, like embodying that perspective, embodying that contact with, you know, with the creator, which he understood as love, and like living that in as pure ways he could.
To me, it brings us back to 17.2, where Ross said, "It is impossible to help another being directly. It is only possible to make catalyst available in whatever form, the most important being the radiation of realization of oneness with the creator from the self."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, I think I've heard other teachers talk about this too, that like Eckhart Tolle being one in particular that I remember specifically, but other teachers as well, that like sometimes someone will bring a problem to him. Like he had a neighbor bring a problem to him, and he was just unable to believe the problem. And in his presence of not believing the problem, the neighbor was able to go like, "Oh, this isn't a problem, is it?" And so it was just like such a strong field that he was holding that her realization showed up. And it feels similar to me, you know, just like being so in direct contact with truth makes it more available for others to be in touch with it.
That makes a lot of sense. I've heard stories similar to that with like Buddha, and how like, I just remember this one story of like some dude who got really angry at Buddha and wanted to like give Buddha a piece of his mind. And then like he went to Buddha, and then he was just so humbled by Buddha's presence that he like asked to become his student.
Yeah.
Yep. And another session, Ross says that I think Jesus put conditions on those that he was going to do healing work with. And one of the conditions was that they understand that the healing was coming through them and he was not doing the healing. And he made people sort of like, before he would do the healing work, he would make people like consider that or agree to that or something. Does anyone else remember that? Am I getting the right source? This was in the Law of One, wasn't it?
I don't remember that.
Anyway, I'm pretty sure that
I remember that. He said he told all the people he healed not to tell anyone.
Right. And that they had to understand that it wasn't him that was doing the healing.
Right.
Yeah. Because he
That
understood
it wasn't
Jesus.
who? That
Jesus would
said
heal
that.
people, would do these
Ah,
miraculous
right.
healings like that we hear the stories about in the Bible and stuff. But Jesus knew it wasn't him doing it. He understood the mechanism. He understood that he was just kind of like filling in as an example of what it's like to have such a profound faith in the Creator and in love. And he would just kind of stand in that role and help other people kind of like tune into what what can happen when you live that way.
Yeah. I have really felt that being in the presence of Byron Katie, that like just what it seems as though she knows is possible in terms of goodness is just like damn, it can be that good. And I feel like I can get in touch with it just being in her presence. Like, okay. Wow, it's that good. It's like, I can't even understand and take in how good it is. Wow. Okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
Does anyone know I mean, I assume folks have at least some context for who Judas was. Does anyone know how Judas shows up in Jesus's story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of like a retelling of the story, but through Ra's lens of like, Judas thought he was doing the right thing, putting Jesus in the position of like he was going to have to do miracles in order to save himself, and he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do that, and so it led to his imprisonment and capture by the Romans and crucifixion.
Yeah. And it was such a like loving thing from one perspective, but also wasn't honoring Jesus's free will. It was using control.
Right. And what Ross seems to be suggesting here was Judas was impressionable by the Orions. Like Jesus was interested in power, was interested in earthly power. And because of that, Judas was. Yeah. And so was able to be impressioned upon by the Orions. It seems like Orion leaned on Judas to be the one to like, cause the end of Jesus's teachings.
Judas was the accountant. He was the most practical minded of the group. That's what that metaphysical church, they do a lot of like pretty deep research into this stuff. And he was always the one who was, because he's like an accountant and he was responsible for the finances. So he was very grounded in practical things. And when like, there's a story where Jesus wanted to give all the money, like they came across like a group that had like come across some disaster. And Jesus was like, okay, give them all our money. And Judas was like, how about he was like whispering to the other disciples. He's like, how about we give them most of our money so that we still have a little bit left for ourselves? The other group's like, dude, like, trust in Jesus, man. Like it'll work out.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting, just to make it kind of, I mean, not that this isn't already connected to our lives, but like I experience this with Aaron sometimes, like where we're trying to like navigate, 3D things. And sometimes Aaron is really good at holding like linear, solutions to things. And thank goodness, like he's good at, filling out forms, and he's good at like figuring things out. And then also sometimes like, I feel like, my projection anyway is like, well, Aaron, I think you've gotten stuck in something. Like, I think you're too linear right now. And he's like, well, help me figure it out then. And I'm like, I don't know. I just think that, it looks like 7 + 7 is 14, but I think maybe it's actually not. And like, it's just such a, how do we solve these problems? Like, how do you make the balance of working within what seems like the confines of reality while also being open to, but maybe something else is possible. And yeah, it's interesting. Like, that's one of the places where we end up finding challenge in our relationship, because I'll get frustrated with him, like, you're stuck, and he's like, well, you're just too far out there, and how do I, like, how do we balance? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, I don't know either. So we get frustrated with each other. But yeah, yeah, it's what an interesting challenge.
I am the accountant in our family.
Exactly.
I'm the Judas.
And I'm the dreamer.
I'm the accountant for sure.
Okay, let's do a couple more before we end today. So
And now
can
it's
someone-
4:44.
Bam, tracking it. Okay, so can someone read 1720 through 22?
I'll read again, unless
Okay,
somebody else.
perfect.
I think everybody's read.
Except for Joshua
Oh wait, Sean.
and Sean.
Oh, Joshua. Right. I lost you, Joshua, because I can only see part of your face. Would you like to read?
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure.
Absolutely. Just making it available.
Questioner. How did this aggressive action against a playmate affect Jesus in his spiritual growth?
Oh, sorry. I think we skipped one. I misguided you. I think we needed to read
17.
19 first. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Yeah, start from 19.
How did Jesus learn? Oh, wait. How did Jesus learn this during his incarnation? Ra. I am Ra. This entity learned the ability by a natural kind of remembering at the very young age. Unfortunately, this entity first discovered his ability to penetrate intelligence infinitely by becoming the distortion you call angry at his playmate. This entity was touched by the entity known as Jesus to you, and was fatally wounded. Thus, the one known as Jesus became aware that there dwelt in him a terrible potential. This entity determined to discover how to use this energy for good and not for negative. This entity was extremely positively polarized and remembered for more than most wanderers do. 1720, questioner. How did this aggressive action against a playmate affect Jesus in his spiritual growth? And where did he go after his physical death? Ra. I am Ra. This entity you called Jesus was galvanized by this experience and began a lifetime of seeking and searching. The entity studied first day and night in its own religious constructs, which you call Judaism, and was learned enough to be a rabbi, as you call the teach learners of this particular rhythm or distortion of understanding at a very young age. At the age of approximately 13 and 1/2 of your years, this energy left the dwelling place of his earthly family, as you would call it, and walked into many other places seeking further information. This went on Sporadically,
Sporadic.
Sporadically.
sorry, until the entity was approximately 25, at which time it returned to his family dwelling and learned and practiced the arts of earthly father. When the entity had become able to integrate or synthesize all experiences, the entity began to speak to other selves and learn what it felt during the preceding years to be of a worthwhile nature. The entity was absolved karmically of the destruction of the other self when it was in its last portion of its life and spoke upon what you would call cross saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of action, or what you call karma. 1721. Then in which density does the entity as Jesus now reside? Ra. I am Ra. This information is harmless, though unimportant. This entity studies now the lessons of wisdom vibrations, the fifth density, also called the light vibration. 1722. Questioner. In our culture, there is a great saying that he will return. Can you tell me if this is planned? Ra. I am Ra. I will attempt to sort out this question. It is difficult. This entity became aware that it is not an entity of itself, but operated as a messenger of the one creator, whom this entity saw as love. This entity was aware of the cycle, was in its last portion, and spoke to the effect that those of its consciousness would return at the harvest. The particular mind-body-spirit complex you call Jesus is what you would call the entity, not to return except as a member of the Confederation, occasionally speaking through a channel. However, there are other of the identical congruencies of consciousness that will welcome those of the fourth density. This is the meaning of the returning. Oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, no
Thanks,
problem.
Joshua.
Mm.
Go ahead, Nia.
Hopefully this is a quick one. The return at harvest. When someone crosses over to the inner planes and sees the staircase of light and has the guardians and guides that help you understand which step to get off on based on your vibration of your indigo light. Are they saying that Jesus is just going to be one of those amongst our crossing over and harvesting of the information and passing it on, like a picture like a cloth sack on our back of accumulated experiences. Like we're handing over our bag of experiences, of the one infinite creator experiencing itself is, what do you think? So like guardian guide on the staircase of vibrational octave and harvest.
Possibly. That's a little differently than I read it. And I'm not saying that what you're saying is incorrect, but it seems like they said that what Ra is saying is that, like, Jesus didn't necessarily literally mean he himself was coming back. He was maybe sort of referring to more like those of his level of, those of his, either of his collective, like whatever social memory complex he was a part of, or just those that were, congruent in consciousness to where he was at, would be those who welcome entities entering into fourth density. So that would be after the harvest. That's like, okay, all those souls who go through the process of ascending the staircase and make their choice, they make the grade, or whatever, they make the vibrational match to fourth density. And then so once fourth density really gets started, there will be teachers. There will be higher density teachers who come and help the fresh, newly minted fourth density souls who are on a newly pure fourth density planet get oriented to the new situation. That's more of what I think Ra says about, the return, rather than like being a part of harvest itself.
Yeah, I've heard it interpreted as the Christ consciousness will be here, and not necessarily Jesus, who is just one incarnation of the Christ consciousness. And I mean, the Christ consciousness is probably already here. Like, and given how many wanderers are here, I mean, some of them must have gotten close to the Christ consciousness, right?
Yeah, totally.
And have you guys heard of the entity Sananda? Does that ring any bells?
Yep.
Yeah. So I've heard Sananda is what Jesus goes by, like now, and that he is currently very active in our solar system, like in the higher realms, like trying to help out with the harvest.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of channels for Sananda. And I think there's a book called A Course in Miracles, which is supposedly channeled from Sananda.
Yep. Yeah, and the Course of Miracles, from what I understand, probably has the most co-readership with the Law of One of any other material. Like, there's so many people who come to the Law of One who study the Course of Miracles, or who have, read it at least. But there's a lot of folks who come to the Law of One through the Course of Miracles, or find the Course of Miracles after coming to the Law of One. It seems to be pretty twin. It seems to really resonate for folks who are interested in the Law of One, resonate with the Course of Miracles. I really liked the part where Ross said, this entity became aware that it was not an entity of itself, but operated as a messenger of the one creator. I mean, that's just, like it reminds me of Ra, how Ra say, like, they don't see themselves as separate. They don't see us as separate beings. But at some level, Jesus knew about himself that he wasn't an entity. He wasn't a separate being. He was a messenger of the creator. And it seems like, it's so difficult to sort through, at least for me, it's so difficult to sort through the teachings of the Bible and figure out what's low distortion and what's been distorted over the years. But there's that whole piece about, Jesus and God being one, right? Like Jesus being the one true Son of God. And it's like, there's some truth in that, it's like, well, not the only Son of God, but there is some truth. It seems like that, Jesus didn't think of himself as a person, a separate person. He thought of himself as an agent of the one. And that's amazing. That's so beautiful. BJ?
Yeah, that feels like it connects to me back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like realizing, that the dissemination of this information doesn't need to go far. Like, it feels like that realization of oneness, like when I'm in the position of realizing oneness, it doesn't need to spread far, because I realize that if I understand it, then you understand it, because there is one mind, or something like that. It just feels really connected to me. Like when I'm in the position of like, everyone needs to understand this, that would be an inherently separate kind of position, because I'm seeing everyone as these different discrete minds, which is in one way true, but it's the illusion. It's illusorily true, and is not a true penetration of the veil, or not a true understanding. So anyway, it just feels like that connects back to that piece earlier.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And there's this other piece about how Jesus didn't have a name. Ross says specifically that when Jesus, as a soul came in, it was an unnamed entity. It didn't have a name. And I think it's interesting to notice how the naming can actually be a part of how we help second density entities become inspirited, to become self-aware. And like the name is what helps us crystallize into an individualized portion of the creator. It can help second density go to third. But at some point, entities drop the naming because they're starting to like realize like, wait, I'm not actually separate at all. And the naming is irrelevant to me. And that seems like, not all higher density entities don't have names, but it seems like Ross says that a lot of higher density entities don't name themselves because they don't require it anymore. And that's interesting. How naming relates to individuation and separation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're at time, but I want to say one more thing.
Great.
I'm really appreciating, this was something that I almost shared in my check-in, like in the Being Myself study group. One of the things that it feels like it's really supporting me in grokking is this shift, like how we see everything sort of backwards. And this is something I've been tracking down for years, but like it's really supporting me to make the shift from sort of body-centered identification to awareness-centered identification. And that like there's this shift from the predominant understanding or story, at least, that my awareness, it like lives inside my body, and like that, like that's backwards, that actually the body lives within my awareness. I don't know, maybe this isn't gonna make sense to everyone, but that just that shift, like I'm actively like working on continuing to shift my consciousness to being centered within awareness. And it feels so connected to all of this, being able to see beyond separation.
Well, I'm going to plug in with that. Thanks for bringing that up. That reminds me of the healer, the ability, you're healing yourself. Nobody else can heal you.
Yeah.
An other self can't heal an other self, but can help inspire, and also through the radiating effect of awareness of self being not self. The irony of like the pairing there, and then like second density being first density and second density being not feeling separate. Then we get into the idea of naming them, giving them that separation and self-awareness, and then reverting back into oneness again, like that.
Yeah.
Interesting to plug in, Jesus's non-naming of self before choice and third density incarnation to help other selves, and feeling the pure love of one infinite creator, and then back again. And it's all like the interwoven fabric in our awareness and analytical minds that pick it apart and look at each thread and then work so hard to weave it back together again.
Yep. Okay, friends. So we're a little past time, so we'll end it here and we'll just go ahead and pick up where we left off next week. Thank you all so much. I really enjoy this. I really enjoyed everything, all the contributions you all made, and I appreciate y'all for being here and sharing this. Until next
Thanks,
time.
everybody.
Thanks, y'all. And thank you,
See you guys.
Jesus.
Thank you, Jesus.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sweetie.